I stood there, my mouth hanging open in utter shock. Just 20 minutes earlier, I had been making the final adjustments, preparing for the most important day of my life. My hair and makeup were flawless, and my freshly manicured nails were perfect. As I gazed at my reflection in the bridal suite mirror, I couldn't help but think I had never looked more stunning. My white lace and silk dress accentuated my cleavage, with my 38C curves subtly lifted by the snug fit. The only things left were slipping into my shoes and placing my veil before waiting for my father to arrive and escort me to the ceremony. The priest, my family, and my friends were all eagerly anticipating my walk down the aisle. Nothing could go wrong. I picked up my veil, ready to put it on, when a knock at the hotel room door interrupted me. Setting the veil aside, I nearly rushed to the door, eager to show my father my dress. But when I opened it, I was surprised to find the best man, Mark, standing there instead. He said he needed to speak with me urgently, so I stepped aside and let him in. His eyes scanned me from head to toe before he spoke. "You look stunning. Your soon-to-be husband is a very lucky man." Confused, I asked what was so important. Was something wrong? Had the priest not arrived? Was someone missing? Or worse, was my fiancé having doubts? Mark's smile slowly faded into an expression I had never seen before. Though he was still smiling, something was unsettling about the look in his eyes, almost angry. "There's something I think you need to see before you walk down that aisle," he said. He turned on the massive TV in the honeymoon suite and slid a disc into the DVD player. I stood frozen, my stomach twisting in knots, as scenes from my hen night unfolded before me in shocking, horrifying detail. Before we dive in, I want to give you a heads up, this story isn't for the faint of heart. It's about betrayal, power, and decisions that can never be taken back. If these topics make you uneasy, now might be the time to stop the video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Your support helps us bring you even more gripping stories. My name is Angela. At 30 years old, I'll be the first to admit I haven't attended many hen parties. My friends and I are still trying to figure out how to make a relationship last more than a year without completely wrecking it. The whole idea of a final night of freedom has always rubbed me the wrong way. It feels strange, especially when stepping into a monogamous marriage. Let's be honest, that so-called freedom was probably gone long before the wedding invitations were even sent out. So when my maid of honor suggested we have one, I wasn't exactly thrilled. That night, I was already on edge before we even arrived at the bar. Once we sat down, I didn't just sip my drink, I downed cocktail after cocktail because, well, that's just how I've always been. One last wild night before you're officially off the market, my friend Jazz cheered, knowing full well I was the life of the party. As I polished off another strawberry daiquiri, she winked at the bartender and signaled for another round. "We're only just getting started," she grinned. To my cheering friends, my eagerness to get drunk made it seem like I was in the mood to celebrate. But the truth was, I wasn't drinking for joy or excitement about my upcoming wedding. I was drinking to drown out the voice in my head screaming, "Angie, you're not ready for this." An hour into the drinking session, I got up to use the bathroom, my legs unsteady beneath me. Inside the quiet cubicle, I took my time. I needed space, a moment to myself. I couldn't explain why, but an overwhelming mix of anger and sadness had crept in. My friends were too loud, too giddy, and too caught up in the excitement for me. Deep down, I envied their carefree lives. Why were they so eager to toast the end of my freedom? All I wanted was to crawl into bed, drunk enough to block out their laughter, their teasing, and their relentless optimism about my future. Instead, I lingered by the hand dryer, stalling my return to the table. Taking slow, deep breaths, I tried to loosen the tightness gripping my chest. What was wrong with me? Why didn't I feel the happiness I was supposed to? I was sure I loved my fiancé, Jaden. And yet, a part of me resented him for wanting to lock me into a life that suddenly felt so final. After the wedding, we were set to move back to his hometown. I could already see the years stretching ahead, supporting his interests, putting his career first, having sex the way he liked it. Was that my future? Was that all my life would be? It wasn't that Jaden was selfish, he just wasn't a mind reader. I had always been a people pleaser, trained since childhood to put others before myself. Speaking up, asking for what I wanted had never been my strong suit. Not that I even knew what I wanted. But one thing was clear, if I didn't figure out how to voice my needs soon, this marriage was going to be a disaster. That was the last thing I remembered from that night. The next morning, I woke up with the worst hangover of my life. My friends filled me in on the events of my hen night, but I couldn't wrap my head around what they were saying. It didn't seem real. But as the footage of that night played out in front of me, I was about to find out that everything they had told me was the truth. I had always harbored a secret fantasy, one I never dared to share with my fiancé. But in a drunken haze one night, I had let it slip to my friends. They remembered. So when they arranged for a stripper at my hen party, they went a step further, booking 2 instead of 1. And not just any dancers, these were the kind known for offering extra entertainment if the price was right. As the DVD played, I immediately recognized my friend's living room. We had decided to celebrate at her place, avoiding the usual club scene filled with handsy strangers. The camera panned just as the music kicked in, showing the 2 men moving in sync around the chair where I sat. Their routine started typical, teasing, tempting, but never making direct contact. I glanced away from the screen, looking over at Mark. He met my gaze with a small smile before turning back to watch. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Back on the screen, the men had shed their clothes, their confidence on full display as they moved around me. My friends were in hysterics, throwing out shameless remarks, urging me to embrace the moment. I kept shaking my head, laughing, but the drinks were hitting me hard. Another shot was placed in my hand, and without hesitation, I tossed it back. One of the dancers grinned. "If you like to drink, try this," he said, dipping his length into a glass of liquor before pulling it out, glistening. He leaned in, offering it to me. The room erupted in cheers, my friends chanting for me to play along. Drunk and reckless, I leaned forward, trailing my tongue over the liquor-drenched skin. The girls screamed in excitement. I laughed, heat rushing to my face, until the second guy did the same. And just like that, I went along with it. One of my friends suddenly perked up with an idea and disappeared into the kitchen. When she returned, she was holding a tray of vodka jelly shots. She smirked and said, "These have more alcohol than anything those guys could offer." I reached for one, but before I could take a bite, she scooped the jelly out and smeared it onto the first dancer's now firm body. I gasped, my eyes widening in surprise. But as laughter and cheers erupted around me, my hesitation started to waver. Egged on by my friends, I stuck out my tongue, attempting to lick the jelly off. It proved to be trickier than I expected, slipping away before I could get a proper taste. Frustration grew, and then one of my friends leaned in and whispered something into my ear. I hesitated for a second, then made a decision. Instead of struggling, I leaned forward, opened my mouth, and took him in, just for a moment, just long enough to clean off the jelly. A loud cheer erupted from the girls, their excitement pushing me further. They called for me to do it again. Laughter and encouragement filled the room, and as I took in the scene, the drinks, the attention, the charged atmosphere, I felt a heat building inside me. The alcohol had stripped away my reservations, and I was starting to enjoy the game more than I ever intended. I turned to Mark, my voice trembling. "Please, turn it off." He didn't move. Instead, he looked at me with an expression that sent a chill down my spine. "We'll talk when it's over," he said firmly. A tear slipped down my cheek as I turned my gaze back to the screen, dreading what was still to come. The recording played on, capturing every moment I had desperately wished was just a hazy, forgotten memory. It showed me giving in to the cheers of my friends, crossing a line I never should have, and ultimately losing myself to the night. I stole a glance at Mark, his eyes fixed on the screen, his face unreadable. My body felt heavy with shame. The weight of my choices pressed down on me, my tears falling faster now. But I couldn't bring myself to speak, to explain, to beg. The video reached its final, humiliating frame, freezing on my face, an image I wished I could erase from existence. I sat there, my breath shallow, my makeup streaked with tears, unable to look away from the evidence of my actions. Mark didn't say a word. He simply walked to the minibar, poured himself a drink, and downed it in one go. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. My hands trembled as I wiped away the mascara-streaked tears from my cheeks. Finally, I found the courage to speak. "Where did you get that video?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Mark leaned against the minibar, swirling the drink in his glass before taking a slow sip. "One of your friends filmed it," he said, his tone unreadable. "Her husband found it and passed it on to me." A fresh wave of humiliation washed over me. My closest friends, one of them had recorded everything. Betrayal clawed at my throat. "Does Jaden know?" I asked, dreading the answer. Mark smirked, the expression sending a chill down my spine. "No. Not yet." He took another sip. "I told everyone to push the wedding back a few hours." "I said you weren't ready." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "What do you mean by that?" Mark set his glass down with a quiet clink and took a step toward me. "Here's the thing," he said smoothly, "I could take this straight to Jaden right now. But that wouldn't be any fun, would it?" My stomach twisted. "Mark," he cut me off. "You have a choice to make. Either we pretend this never happened, and you owe me, or we let the truth come out, and you deal with the fallout." His voice was calm, but there was something dark beneath it. I felt trapped, cornered in a way I had never experienced before. My breath came in short gasps as my mind raced. What was he asking of me? "You don't get to walk away from this scot-free," he continued, tilting his head. "But don't worry, I'll make it easy for you." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of my mistake and the even heavier weight of the impossible decision before me. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as Mark's words sank in. My entire world had shattered in a matter of minutes. The weight of what I had done, what had been recorded, and what Mark was now demanding from me pressed down like a crushing force. He wanted me to be his secret and toy. I wiped the tears from my face, but they kept falling. "You can't do this," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Please, don't ruin my life." Mark took a slow sip of his drink, his expression eerily calm. "Ruin your life?" He let out a short laugh. "I'm giving you a choice." "A choice?" There was no choice. Either I surrendered to him, or he would expose me. My family, deeply religious, unwavering in their morals, would disown me. My fiancé, the man I had promised forever to, would never forgive me. And my friends? The same ones who had cheered me on that night? They would vanish, leaving me to bear the shame alone. I swallowed hard, my throat burning. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," Mark leaned in, his voice dropping lower. "It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you did." He placed the empty glass on the table with a quiet clink. "So, what's it going to be? Do as I say, and this stays between us. Refuse, and I'll make sure everyone sees exactly what kind of bride you really are." My hands trembled in my lap. The girl on that screen, laughing, reckless, lost in the moment, felt like a stranger. But I couldn't deny it. That was me. Now, that moment of weakness had given Mark complete control over my life. Tears blurred my vision as I struggled to breathe. "You're a monster," I choked out. He smiled. "No, sweetheart. I'm just a man who knows an opportunity when he sees one." The air in the room grew heavier as the realization settled in. No matter what I did next, I would never escape this. The past couldn't be undone, and the future, my future, was no longer mine to control. Mark finished his drink and walked over to me. "Get on your knees," he said. He unzipped his trousers and pulled out his meat. He didn't say a word, he just stared at me. The weight of my actions crushed me as I stood before Mark, my entire world unraveling in his grasp. The man who was supposed to be my friend now held my future in his hands, twisting it to his will. My body trembled, not just from fear but from the overwhelming sense of humiliation, guilt, and helplessness. I had made mistakes, ones I couldn't take back. But this? This was something else entirely. This was control. Manipulation. A punishment that would never end unless I gave in. Tears streamed down my face as Mark made his demands clear. He had proof of my worst night, evidence that could destroy everything. My family, my fiancé, my entire life as I knew it would come crumbling down if he chose to expose me. And he would, unless I did as he said. I tried to reason with him, tried to find some trace of the friend I once trusted, but he was gone. In his place stood a man who saw me as nothing more than a pawn in his game. With my hands shaking and my mind clouded with regret, I barely registered my own voice as I agreed. Not because I wanted to. Not because I had a choice. But because I was trapped. The wedding day arrived, but I felt like a stranger in my own body. As I walked down the aisle, each step felt heavier than the last. The white dress, the flowers, the expectant smiles of my loved ones, all of it felt like a cruel mockery of the truth I carried inside me. I should have stopped. Should have run. Should have screamed the truth before it was too late. But I didn't. Because in that moment, fear held me tighter than love ever could. The moment I reached the altar, my breath caught in my throat. There he was, Jaden, the man who loved me without question, his eyes filled with pride, devotion, and an unwavering trust that I no longer deserved. My hands trembled as he took them in his warmth sending a fresh wave of guilt crashing over me. I should have told him. I should have found the strength to confess, to let him see the truth before we stood before our family, before vows were exchanged, before the weight of forever settled onto our shoulders. But I didn't. Instead, I convinced myself that I was doing the right thing. That silence was mercy. That sparing him from the pain of betrayal was the only way to make up for what I had done. You'll destroy him if you tell the truth, Angie. That thought took root, growing stronger with each second that passed. It wasn't about saving myself, I had already lost. It was about protecting him. Jaden deserved love, loyalty, and a marriage untainted by heartbreak. So I looked him in the eye, held my breath, and spoke the words that should have meant everything. I vowed to be faithful. Forsaking all others. My voice wavered, but the truth behind it was buried deep, locked away beneath layers of shame and self-loathing. And when we kissed, sealing our promise before the world, I wept. Happy tears, I insisted, forcing a smile when he cradled my face. He trusted me. He believed me. And that was the greatest lie of all. By the time the reception rolled around, the weight of it all pressed down on me so heavily that I could barely stand it. I drank too much, hoping to drown out the crushing guilt, but it only made things worse. Soon, I found myself hunched over a toilet, my body shaking as I dry-heaved, my head spinning with everything I refused to face. Nina, my best friend, was by my side in an instant, her hand rubbing soothing circles on my back. Angie, what's wrong? I grasped at excuses, desperate to keep the truth from slipping out. I'm just hormonal. Weddings are overwhelming. The attention, the pressure, it's all too much. She nodded, accepting my words at face value. But deep down, I knew the truth. The hardest part wasn't saying my vows. It was living with them. But how could I even begin? How could I put into words the weight I had carried since my wedding day? The shame that had embedded itself into every corner of my life, the guilt that had poisoned even the happiest of moments? I wiped at my eyes, my breath shaky. Nina, you don't understand. Then make me understand. Her voice was firm, but her eyes were soft. She reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. You're my best friend. Whatever it is, you don't have to go through it alone. Alone. That was exactly how I had felt for years. I looked down at my lap, unable to meet her gaze. I did something terrible, I whispered. Her grip on my hand didn't falter. If anything, she held on tighter, silently urging me to go on. And just like that, my walls crumbled. Through broken sobs, I told her everything. The bachelorette party. The blackmail. The vows I had spoken with lies in my heart. How I had convinced myself that silence was protection when, in truth, it was nothing but cowardice. When I finally looked up, expecting disgust or judgment, I found neither. Nina's eyes were filled with something else, sadness. Not for what I had done, but for how much I had suffered because of it. "Oh, Angie." She exhaled, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I shook my head, fresh tears spilling down my cheeks. "Because I couldn't. Because I thought if I just buried it deep enough, it would go away." She pulled me into a tight embrace, holding me as I cried. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." And for the first time in years, I believed her. Begging Nina not to hate me, I admitted what had happened at the hen party. I explained how, through 2 years of marriage, I'd continued keeping the truth from Jayden. Her body froze. She pulled away from me. Her next words made my blood run cold. "Angie. Either you tell him or I will." "What?" I couldn't breathe. I'd never felt so close to a panic attack. "But he's innocent, Nina. He doesn't deserve to go through hell because of me. I don't want to ruin his life because of my stupid mistake." "You think you're doing him a favor by lying? Are you delusional? You're keeping the truth from him. That's wrong. You're manipulating him into believing he lives in a different reality." Bawling, I buried my head in my hands. Nina grabbed me by the shoulders and shook me. "Listen, Angie. You don't want to hurt him. I get it. But the fact that you cheated on him shows you guys have problems. If you refuse to be honest, you have no hope in hell of repairing your relationship. He also deserves to know the kind of friends he has around him." She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. "Like I said. Either you tell him or I will." I wish I could say I had the guts to fix my own marriage. But I couldn't bear the thought of facing Jayden. So I chose the cowardly option, just as I'd done for the past 2 years. "You tell him," I whimpered. Nina tooted, shook her head, and picked up the phone. The day Jayden signed the divorce papers, I sat in my car for hours, staring at the document in my lap, knowing my marriage was officially over. I had no one to blame but myself. I thought keeping my secret was an act of love, a way to shield him from pain. But all I had done was take away his right to decide for himself. That was the real betrayal. In the years since, I've had time to sit with my mistakes, to understand the weight of them. I lost a good man because I was too afraid to face the consequences of my actions. But in the end, the truth came for me anyway. It always does. If I ever find myself walking down the aisle again, one thing is certain, I won't be having a hen night. Some lessons are too painful to repeat.
If my story resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell to stay updated, and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. See you in my next video.